Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this ordinary meeting of Wingecarribee Shire Council on Wednesday, the 20th of March. Could I remind everybody that the meeting is being webcast, and ask those with mobile phones to either turn them off or put them on to silent mode. Thank you very much. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. Our statement of ethical obligations. As Administrator, I will undertake the duties of the Office of Administrator in the best interests of the people of the Wingecarribee Shire Council area and to act faithfully and impartially in carrying out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment. I am committed to the declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to items listed for consideration on the agenda or which are considered at this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct and the Code of Meeting Practice. Apologies, obviously there are none. Adoption of minutes of the previous meeting. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on 21 February 2024 be adopted as a true and correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest?
There are no declarations of interest, Mr May.
Thank you. There is no Administrator minute for this meeting. We now move to matters listed for consideration. General Manager, the first one being the proposed low and medium rise housing reforms. Item 8.1.
Thank you, Mr May. Mr Killick, the Exec Manager, Strategic Outcomes, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May. The New South Wales Government is proposing reforms to address the housing crisis and meet the National Housing Accord targets. The reforms are mainly targeted at increasing the supply of low-rise housing, mainly terraces and dual occupancies, as well as mid-rise housing up to 6 stories in well-located areas near train stations. The proposed reforms are primarily targeted at the 6 cities region, which does not include Wingecarribee Shire. The one reform that affects Wingecarribee is the proposal to permit dual occupancies in the R2 low density zone across the state. I'm pleased to say Wingecarribee Shire is ahead of the reforms, as we already permit dual occupancies in the R2 zone under the Wingecarribee Local Environmental Plan. Dual occupancies have been permissible with consent in the R2 zone in Wingecarribee since 2010. The rationale for reform is understandable. However, the state is potentially undermining neighbouring councils' strategic frameworks and detailed strategic land use planning work to unintentionally complicate an already extremely complicated planning system. Our submission is important to ensure the Wingecarribee voice is heard, and we support our neighbouring councils that are within the 6 cities region.
Thanks for that. The draft letter, the last paragraph on page 1,
Sorry, my laptop's taking its time.
You're right, you're right.
Yes.
Council does not support the introduction of non-refusal standards. Then you go on, which places pressure on Council's development assessment officers and panels to approve suboptimal development proposals. But if they're non-refusal standards, how do they go to the officers in the panel?
Still goes to the officer under delegation or to the panel to make that determination, but they essentially can't say no because it's a new non-refusal standard.
So you're not talking about private certification, you're talking about where the state government is imposing a requirement on the council not to say no without actually giving it to private certifiers.
It's mainly the DA realm. It's interesting in that assessment still takes place, but the state is mandating that councils cannot say no.
Interesting. Okay. Why do you, in the recommendation, do you have number 3 when that's the general manager's job? You might want to. It's your role to expeditiously convey decisions to the council.
You are correct, Mr. May. There is a practice where there has been a practice where council writes to a minister that it would go under the mayor's signature, but I'm more than happy as the general manager to do that from here on in.
Well, councils I've been at, that's the way it's worked. And can we change number 3 to a copy of the submission be forwarded to the members for Goulburn and Wallandilly? Look, in my view, there's no question this council is playing its part.
Indeed.
Can you, I can't, can you blow it up? I can't read it, sorry. I don't know if the residents can, but I couldn't. Take out the last 2 lines. A copy of the submission before to the members for Goulburn and Wallandilly for their information. And can I suggest, I'm not going to build this into the recommendation, but the last paragraph should be altered to either the general manager or the executive manager of strategic outcomes, not an officer. So I won't build that in. But, okay, thank you. I declare that carried. Next item. 8.2 Berrimah Hotel site.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. I'd like to table a letter that was emailed through on Monday the 18th of March from Ms Frances Mayer on behalf of the Berrimah Residents Association, and we'll include that on the website. Thank you. And the Exec Manager Strategic Outcomes will speak to this item as well. Thank you.
I have seen this letter. I share their concern.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May. Firstly, we acknowledge the significance of the former Berrimah Jail as one of the oldest jails in mainland Australia, its status as a state and local heritage item, and its contribution to the character of Berrimah Village, both its streetscapes and landscapes. We understand the passion, the sensitivities and motivations of the Berrimah community and more broadly across the Wingecarribee Southern Highlands community. This is an early technical input only to inform the SEARs. Professional officer comments were provided to the department in mid-February due to the department's extremely tight timeframes, and we said at the time that council endorsed input would be provided at the EIS or Environmental Impact Statement stage. I've been informed the SEARs has since been issued by the department.
Can you just repeat what you just said?
The full paragraph. This is an early technical input only to inform the SEARs, which stands for the Secretary's Environmental Assessment Requirements. Professional officer comments were provided to the department in mid-February due to the department's tight timeframes, and we said at the time that council endorsed input would be provided at the EIS stage. I've been informed the CEARS has since been issued by the department. I reiterate there are no plans or concept designs submitted at the CEARS stage. It is purely a technical input referencing the existing planning and regulatory frameworks such as our LEP, DCP and existing heritage inventories. The upcoming opportunity at the EIS stage, the environmental impact statement stage, will provide council and community submissions to ensure that any proposal respects the heritage fabric, demonstrates architectural design excellence, and best practice adaptive heritage reuse. We will reach out to community groups to gauge community sentiment and understand points of consensus and concern at the EIS stage. Community sentiment can be relayed to the department for consideration, as we've previously done with all state significant development, in a culture of council resident participation. I'll also read into the minutes an addendum or additional comments for the report to provide further context to this report, noting previous council correspondence dated from the 15th of October 2021 addressed to the member for Goulburn, requesting a meeting with the former Minister for Water, Property and Housing at the time. That correspondence relayed Berrima community concerns with the open-ended expression of interest process during the sale of the jail by the then state government. Council had advocated for a collaborative approach, in particular the active involvement of both council and the community, for the creation of a community-led strategic vision for the site to inform Property and Development New South Wales EOI process. Council advocated for 3 key steps at the time to frame the EOI process and future uses of the site. And these 3 steps included strategic and contextual analysis, developing a community-led strategic vision with consultation, and documenting that strategic vision. This collaborative approach was unfortunately not taken up by Property and Development New South Wales at the time, and the EOI process proceeded in 2022. The Berrima Jail is now in private ownership. Council's technical input today for the SSD CEARS remains consistent with the spirit of this original collaborative approach, including strong recommendations for a master plan, conservation management plan, adherence to the Berrima DCP, and an architectural design competition. A master plan means any proposal can be strategically considered and sensitively curated based on a vision reached by broad consensus. A master plan approach is also effective in setting and tempering community expectations and avoiding any cumulative impacts in the long term. An architectural design competition based on the master plan vision would also provide the community with concept design options that showcase best practice heritage adaptive reuse and ensure architectural design excellence for the former jail and its environs, being Berrima Village's character streetscapes and landscapes. I therefore recommend a 3rd point in the recommendation for the resolution, that Council note previous representations to Property and Development New South Wales in relation to the preparation of a community-led strategic vision and master plan.
With respect, it's okay for the council to note, but we want the government to take that on board. Look, is there a statutory obligation for the Department of Planning to speak with the council on the way through for the CEARS?
I'm not sure if it's a statutory obligation. It is part of the CEARS process in sort of public-facing documents. I don't know the statutory grounding for that in law. They did provide us with I think it was 8 business days. And that's why professional officer comments were provided.
But the professional officer, I don't want to cut you off, but the professional officer comments align with what this report is.
Indeed. And it, looking back at the 2021 letter about the master plan and the community-led strategic vision, it's also in keeping with the spirit of that original council intention or council position of the time, which continues to today.
Here we go again. It looks like to me, with this application, this is such an important matter, and it was so important to the government that they had to get on and sell it, but then it took 18 months or so for it to settle, when we could have dealt with all these issues along the way. I'm surprised that they've asked us for this information. It comes to council, but they've issued it. So why are we proceeding?
So the department proceeded based on the professional officer's comments, which were subject to council endorsement at the EIS stage. It's primarily a technical input. So it references what's already in the LEP, DCP and the heritage inventories. There was no analysis or assessment undertaken, and that's very much the domain of the EIS stage.
I understand that, and twice in this report, you say opportunities for council and community input, engagement and submissions will be available multiple times. But this doesn't start us in a very good way in dealing with this state authority in what is a very, very important issue, not only, as I said before, to Berrimah residents, but the Shire generally. And really, it's on the state register. I don't really expect you to offer any answer to that because...
Okay.
Anyhow, General Manager, you got a comment, or you're just trying to protect the staff?
Both. No, look, my only comment would be, and you would have heard the Executive Manager Strategic Outcomes state we had eight working days, and it has been an issue, not just on this matter, but other matters, in the time that Council is being given to provide a response. And ideally, with matters of this significance, we would want to bring submissions to the Council for consideration before formally submitting. We have asked previously if we can have a longer lead-in time, so we have the opportunity, because often it doesn't fall within the meeting cycle, and often, it as the Exec Manager has said, often we're given a very, very short time frame for things that are quite significant and of high community interest.
Well, it just seems to me, with the Berrimah Jail, whenever residents and the council are involved, it's urgent. But when the government is involved, no matter which government, it seems to be quick. Look, I think we've got to firm this recommendation up to let the Minister know our objection to the fact that the CERS was issued prior to the council having an opportunity to formally respond. And one other matter, the two residents who spoke, have you got any comment to make in relation to the submissions? Does that change your recommendations, or?
I won't speak to permissibility without legal advice, and it's the matter of permissibility. Council has a huge role, but in law, in planning law, permissibility is assessed by the assessing authority, being the state in this case. So I won't comment on that. I will comment on the unfortunate oversight of not informing the Berrimah Residents Association and other community groups. I think it's my 4th or 5th month here. I should know better, but I am still getting to know our community, even though I married into it 10 years ago. That oversight won't happen again, so I do apologise for any offence caused. And I reiterate that it was a technical input, and hence the oversight.
I understand that, but you do have support staff who should have tipped you off to it. Can I move then that that council endorse the submission in relation to the scoping report for the Berrima Hotel State Significant Proposal, noting its disapproval of the fact that the report has already been issued and seek an explanation. Take 2 out. It's not necessary, that's the General Manager's job. So 3 becomes 2. Amend the submission. No, take out no previous recommendations. Amend the submission to take account of, and then previous representations. And 3, a copy of the submission be forwarded to the member for Goulburn. And the member be requested to seek an explanation from the Department of Planning as why council was only given 8 days to make a submission on a matter of such heritage importance, such importance, of such importance, and why the scoping report was issued prior to formal import.
Mr. May, if we could maybe assist with some wording, yeah. So point 3 page, if we can just say that council and then forward a copy of the submission to the member for Goulburn, and then the rest is fine. In terms of the sort of scoping report,
It should read the SEARS rather than scoping report.
yeah, so why the Sears?
That covers the earlier letter and the concerns in relation to the fact that they've acted already. Declare that carried. Next item is number 1 Bowman Road, 8.3, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Again, Mr. Killick will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this is a minor planning proposal to permit a business premises at 1 Bowman Road, Moss Vale, where a co-located new animal shelter and SES facility is currently being built. The subject land is owned by council and it is within the Southern Highlands Innovation Park, affectionately known as the SHIP. The land is zoned E4 General Industrial, and under the Wingecarribee LEP, business premises are listed as a prohibited use in the E4 zone. This matter was reported to the local planning panel on the 28th of February 2024 for advice. The panel did not support the planning proposal in its original form, requesting the planning proposal provide additional strategic merit justifications. The panel also advised any business premises should be specified to a particular business use and be restricted by floor area. Professional officers amended the planning proposal to reflect the panel's advice, providing stronger strategic justifications. These include considering the existing zone objectives, emerging strategic work from the Southern Highlands Innovation Park, and the complementary nature of surrounding land uses. The land is within the Innovation Park, and the emerging vision and draft master plan indicates this area is appropriate for commercial activation, with the local activity hub to provide goods and services without adversely affecting or competing with the established Moss Vale Town Centre. The proposal is strategically consistent with the existing zone objectives, as well as the emerging vision and master planning for the Innovation Park. While we're not preempting the Innovation Park strategic work by requesting a rezoning, an APU or additional permitted use is a suitable mechanism under the LEP. The panel's advice to restrict the business premises by floor area is viewed as an unnecessarily prescriptive planning practice. Sufficient checks and balances are in place, including the requirement for a DA conditions of consent, and council's own property leasing conditions. The broader area is expected to evolve as the Innovation Park is realised in coming years. The emerging vision and draft master plan would likely facilitate business premises to be permissible right across the Innovation Park. Therefore, the professional officer's recommendation is to proceed with the revised planning proposal with its stronger strategic justifications and request gateway determination from the Department of Planning.
I'm now a little bit confused. For the first time, I don't agree with the panel's recommendation. And are you saying that you don't want to make it as prescriptive as the 20 square metres, was it? So, yeah, thank you for that. So the 25.78 square metres, you're not agreeing with that? You're saying the whole site?
We're saying it's an unnecessarily prescriptive approach.
I understand that. But are you running with it, or you're
We're
going
not
against
running with it. No.
Okay, good. Look, can you tell me, when did the council resolve, on page 71, when did council resolve to have an animal grooming service? There's never been such a resolution. And to my knowledge, I thought it was a usage ancillary to the use as a pound.
I believe we sought legal advice about that, and we found that it wasn't ancillary.
But you might have taken legal advice, but the council wasn't talking about a pet grooming. There was a whole range of activities. Look, my little vision was that the reception area for the pound could be manned by a third party who had use of the 30 square metre area, and maybe they don't pay rent for that, but they provide a reception service, and the 25 metres wouldn't allow that.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. May, I think in the report, and the Director may wish to add to this, it doesn't say it will, it says such as. So the intent was to look at uses that would be complementary to the animal shelter, and the wording in the report is, it says an ideal location for a small animal welfare business such as, not necessarily, but the Director may wish to add to that.
Thank you, General Manager. Yes, I support that. That was the proposal was to look at a supporting business, and it was envisaged that the reception area would be shared from what that business might have been. But at the time that that this was first mooted, the business was considered, or advice was given that the business would be considered as ancillary to the development. However, since that time, we've been advised that we have to undertake this process to be able to open it up to other commercial uses. But your vision for that shared service and reception area, that's still valid.
That's good news. So that won't be affected by what you're proposing now.
No, instead it'll be facilitating it.
Yeah.
And the spirit of this is, ensuring that the planning system facilitates the vision, and the emerging vision is that it's appropriate for commercial activation and broader business premises, even around that site. This is not a Wingecarribee sort of planning position. We've adopted a standard instrument LEP from the state, and there's a huge land use table attached to the E4 zone, and business premises just happens to sit in the prohibited part of that table.
And would a veterinary service be described as a business premise?
I think it would. It's
Mr. Administrator, so it's a separately defined term, even though it is, in common terms, a form of business. It's actually a separate defined term under the standard instrument and under our LEP.
So it would be permitted, because it's not noted as prohibited.
Through Mr. May, yes, a veterinary practice is permitted, but other business premises such as animal grooming are not. If it was an ancillary, so if it was a service that was provided by the animal shelter as part of their service, then that would be ancillary, but it's being leased out to a separate business, being run separately, and so hence the advice that was received is that it is a separate use and is prohibited.
But there'd be nothing stopping the council if they could find a veterinary service to agree to a lease now.
No, they'll just need a DA rather than a planning proposal.
Mr. Mayor, I think the intent of the planning proposal is to broaden the net, so it opens up other opportunities, and we're not locked into a specific outcome. That's the intent.
Look, I don't want to waste too much time on this, but I understood that we spent a lot of money as a council with vets associated with the animal pound for one reason or another. And this wasn't my idea, it was a former acting director's idea that perhaps we could put a veterinarian service in there and save a lot of resource. Now, I know we went to expression of interest and got nothing, but nobody at that stage saw what the vision was. Okay, no one else agrees with me. So the best way out is so we can get a range of services to do this.
Indeed, I'll reiterate, the whole point of the planning system is to facilitate the vision, and sometimes planning can be an incredibly blunt instrument, zoning.
Yeah.
And you've tested my statutory planning knowledge as a strategic planner. But yes, the permissibilities are unfortunately very complex. But we are working on that in the strategy space to open up the land uses and permissibilities as part of the SHIP strategic work.
Yeah, but it would have been better if the author of the report had put that there's nothing stopping a veterinary clinic going in there instead of turning it into a grooming. That's my objection in the report.
We'll be more specific next time.
But there's nothing now stopping the council going to real estate agents and asking if while this process is happening, because the veterinary service would be by far the best. It wouldn't have a veterinary hospital or anything like that, but there is an opportunity for vet's rooms to be there, ancillary to their use. You see where I'm coming from? And I think, if it was rent-free and they provided the veterinary services to the pound and a reception, not a shared reception, I think the idea of having a pound having a reception is not appropriate, but having a shared person, having a person there who was looking after the veterinary services, but also the council's receipt of animals makes sense. It's thinking outside the box, and I think there's not enough of that in this place. But anyhow, on the basis then that we can try and find a vet to operate this, we don't need to go back to the panel. We can now go to a gateway. But as a courtesy, are they advised of the decision or not?
We can advise them of the decision, but there's no requirement to go back. They provide advice, and I understand the advice that they provided. We just don't want to be in a position where, if we specify 30 square metres maximum,
Couldn't agree more.
it becomes 31 square metres, 31.5. It's an unnecessarily prescriptive approach.
So just to add to Mr. Killick's, so the intent of the planning, I know we've delved into the operational model. I would respectfully disagree with not thinking outside the box. The idea of having the business or ancillary use actually came from someone who's in the room. But I think the benefit of this planning approach is it does broaden out the opportunities. Now, whether it's going to be a vet, whether it's going to be a grooming service, whatever, that will be market driven. But at least what it does is it gives the council the opportunity to really throw the net broadly, see what's out there, what the interest is, what the market response is, and how we can actually deliver a better facility for the community.
And what are the chances of this planning proposal being approved?
I've worked for the state. This is the simplest planning proposal I've seen in a while. It is a very routine planning proposal. I don't see any risks with the Department of Planning.
So it would be consistent for the council to start to seek an operator concurrently with this process, strictly on the basis that it requires, if it's not a vet, a gateway approval.
It can occur concurrently. Like I said, there are checks and balances. They still require a DA conditions of consent.
Yeah, understand.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. And I would move the recommendation as outlined on page 65 of the business paper and declare that carried. Um, 8.4, the draft community heritage study. There's no introduction. Thank you for this one. I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 95 of the business paper and declare that carried. 9.1, mountain bike riding at Welby landfill.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director, Service and Project Delivery, Ms. Targa, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager, Mr. May. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the future provision of mountain bike track facilities on the former Welby landfill as part of the remediation works. Council has been working with mountain bike industry experts, Trail Care, to review the site, and it has been identified that the northern and western slopes of the remediated landfill will offer opportunity for a mountain bike jump park. The consultants who are completing all investigations, reports and plans for the landfill closure are currently reviewing the proposal to determine the minimum design and construction requirements to ensure any future mountain bike tracks do not negatively impact the long-term and short-term condition of the Welby landfill capping. The potential provision of a mountain bike jump park will further enhance the mountain biking facilities of the Shire. The delivery of the jump park being subject to completion of the landfill remediation and receipt of grant funding, it is not forecasted to be delivered for at least 3 years. In the interim, there are several measures that Council is seeking to progress in collaboration with local mountain biking group Highlands Trails, which are detailed within the report. It's therefore recommended that Council receive and note this update report. Thank you.
It's unfortunate coincidence that Mount Gibraltar has re-emerged. I take the view that we wouldn't be doing this mountain biking and Welby landfill remediation project and the works at Welby now if it hadn't been for Mount Gibraltar. So I see nothing wrong with introducing Mount Gibraltar into this matter. Do you take a contrary view? Or? That said, is there any connection with the stakeholders that you're dealing with and the people who are now developing tracks on the southern side of Mount Gibraltar?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can't answer that question.
Was there any activity on the weekend that we know of?
Mr. May, not the so we patrolled on the weekend. The rangers visited both days, and they didn't see any activity occurring that was reported on the weekend. So they saw nothing.
I met with the volunteers. I think it was on Thursday, and while we were there was activity, but none of us were authorised to do anything about it, because neither a mayor or a councillor has no authority. And the volunteers have no authority. The question I would ask, in Council in September 23 resolved that the General Manager ensure there is continued monitoring of the illegal track construction and usage at Mount Gibraltar, especially during weekends and public holidays. Are you happy that that's been satisfied?
Through Mr. May, yes, we are continuing to monitor on the weekends. Yes.
That wasn't really the question, but I see where you're coming from.
Sorry, Mr. May.
Sorry.
It has just been confirmed that Highland Trails is not affiliated with the unauthorised trails on the JIP.
I'm sorry,
I said it has just been confirmed that Highlands Trails is not affiliated with the unauthorised trails on the JIP.
Thank you. Okay, that's important because this was, I feel let down personally, and I think you should too, and you should as well. The amount of work that the staff has done to acknowledge that something has to happen, and was always made very clear, I thought, that this was going to take time to get another location. But then to see what has happened on the southern side is shocking. No, sorry, you can't. So the staff will continue to monitor on weekends and after school, or I was up there during school hours, what is going on, and are there opportunities for other enforcement and monitoring activities to take place up there?
To you, Mr. May, yes. So the Rangers visiting is one means by which we are monitoring and monitoring what activity that's occurring up there without going into detail.
Thank you. Because at the end of the day, you need evidence. But no matter what you do, I think you need to ensure that there is appropriate signage for whatever you might be doing. Otherwise, we can get ourselves into trouble. But you know, the view that you cannot ask a miner for their name and you cannot take a photograph of a miner doing something in the exercise of your official function is not correct. And I made that very clear to the volunteers, as I made clear to the volunteers that they have no authority and I have no authority. The authority is held by the General Manager to act. So, look, I think that's I don't think there needs to be anything added to this except express disappointment and hope that it stops. But I don't know about that until I think there's some actual enforcement. And anyhow, in relation to item 9.1, I'd move the officer's recommendation outlined on page 99 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Next one is Old South Road 10-tonne limit. There's no introduction on page 104. I thank the staff for following up on this one. In relation to item 9.2, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 104 of the business paper and declare it carried. 9.3, the old Penrose Hall. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms. Foster.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, in 2021, the Penrose Community Association was successful in obtaining a grant for the construction of the new community hall to be located on the same parcel of land that the existing 1950s hall is located. Community meetings were held late last year to discuss potential uses for the old hall once a new facility opened. The hall has limited commercial potential and all community functions can be accommodated in the new facility. There are two options for the old hall, to be repurposed or to be demolished. The PCA have proposed a lease of the facility at a peppercorn rent with a trial period of 12 months. Council officers have proposed a licence for 12 months to determine the viability of having two halls operationally so close together. We will be able to then quantify potential income during that 12-month period and then also validate the maintenance costs to keep both halls open.
Thank you. I think this is a great outcome. I'm still very surprised that the former council, in the knowledge that they were going to get a hall, and even when I arrived, I was told by the federal member that a hall was going to be delivered, that they continue to spend money to get rid of the asbestos out of the site when it could have possibly been dealt with, use that money in better ways, but that's nothing to do with us. In relation to item 9.13, the old Penrose Hall, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 108 of the business paper 1, 2 and 3 and declare that carried. The DA tracker, General Manager, 9.4.
Thank you, Mr. May. So Council's Chief Information Officer will introduce this item and also provide a short demonstration of the new e-tracker. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the application tracker, a project that Council officers in collaboration with Accelerator have been working on for the past months. As part of this introduction, Julianne will be demonstrating the application tracker, which is to go live on the 28th of March. I would like to note that we were unsuccessful in a February go live as per the December 2023 report, and this was due to technological barriers, which saw slippage in timelines, though the demonstration today will show the readiness of the technology and the system. After go live, there will be additional work that will be required to complete the transition away from the existing DA tracker, though in the meantime, all information will be available via the website, via two links on the Council website. The new application tracker has features that will be beneficial to the applicants and the community. These features are, but not limited to, the presentation of applications in a multi-view user interface, including the ability to view on a map layout, the ability to subscribe and follow an application receiving updates as the application progresses. This is not only beneficial for the applicant, but also for the owner and for the neighbours as well. Also, the ability to make a submission via the online tracker. The Council will be one of the few that have adopted this digital technology. I would like to make reference that any application that has been submitted after the 29th of February 2024 will have the following additional information available online: the internal floor plan layout, public submissions, formal correspondences and requests, applicant and owner correspondences, additional supporting documentation, including reports and amended plans, and the final internal referral advice and specialist consultant advice. I will now hand over to Julianne, who will demonstrate some of the functionality of the application tracker.
Thank you, George. Welcome. I'd just like to go through the application tracker, as you can see on your screens there. We've worked really hard with the developer to make it very user-friendly, and community will be able to jump on and see this when they actually go for the journey with us. The first thing I'd like to show is that when you come onto the page, you see that it's a list view. So these are the current applications that we have, and these are where you can see where they're at and view them. The two options that you have is three options you can have is a list view, a map view, or a card view. The list on the map view, you can actually click on the red dot and you'll actually see the card where you can go to the application and see what stages it's at. This application is at the lodgement stage, so it's lodged and being allocated. One of the features that we've got, which is really good, is you can now actually follow this application. That doesn't mean that one person follows it like it does with the New South Wales Planning Portal. It means multiple people can follow the application. So that means the owner, who may not be the applicant, can follow it, and many other community members as well. There's no limitation to people who follow, and they will also be able to know where and what we're at with the stages. You click on follow, put in your name and email, and you'll receive notifications along our journey for our application tracker.
That's any activity.
That's any of the significant activity in the stage decision stage. So you'll see here there's a stage decision, and that's when the activity will be emailed to the person who is following it to tell them what the update is. One of the other features that we've got is to actually support the following is you actually will be notified when we go on to public exhibition. So as you can see here, the stage is public exhibition. What you can do is actually put, when you're following it, if you want to make a submission against the application or for the application, you easily jump onto Application Tracker and click Submission. The submission will come up with our terms and conditions. When you scroll through them, you need to read them and you need to declare that you're accepting these terms and conditions and that you consent to these terms and conditions as well before you're actually able to put any lodgement in. When you click on the agree, we'll move down, you can make your submission type. So your submission type here is whether you support the development, object to the development, or whether you want to comment on the development. For today's exercise, I'm going to comment on the development. I'll put in my details. Sorry, it takes a little while. Oops. And then I will put in my submission comments in here, and I can also add attachments at the same time. So I put my comments in there and I can add the attachments. With that attachments, you can actually attach anything up to 100 megabyte, but we're saying you can do a petition if there's other people who support you, if there's plans that you want to include, or there's documentation or visuals that you'd like.
I don't interrupt you, but if I'm the neighbour and I have a different idea to how to handle that window, I can do a little plan and scan it and submit it as. Thank you.
Yes, you can. So that way then you've got supporting documentation to support your submission as well. That will then be submitted to council. I just put my email address in. The owner, when you actually hit submit, you'll actually see straight away that it's actually gone to council for consideration, and then that will go through the submission process that it was developed by council. Along the journey, as I said, you will also get all your notifications, and then when we finally get to the stage of approval, anybody who is following this application will get notified that it has now been approved, and in that notification they can have a link that jumps online here, and they're able to view the documents, the process, how they got to the process, and all the attributes as well. Thank you.
So a couple of questions. So this in effect addresses the issues that I've raised in the various times this has been here to
Correct,
the
Mr.
council.
Administrator. Correct.
You can still make a handwritten submission.
Mr. Administrator, that's correct. We'll still accept handwritten, emailed submissions, any submission that comes through.
Any submission.
Yes.
And how long is it likely for that submission to appear on the system after it's received? Weeks or days or
Within 5 days,
within 5 days?
5 working days.
It'll go up.
Within 5
Because I know you've got statutory obligations for privacy
Yes, correct.
and the like. And if people say silly things in their submissions about their neighbour or whoever, in effect they're on their own.
Correct. By accepting the terms and conditions that we've outlined, on the application tracker, they're consenting that anything they put up will be put up.
And when the application is accepted, will a resident be able to see, and in particular the owner as against the applicant on occasions, the to and fro that's going on between the council to get information that hasn't been submitted, that should be submitted? Because so often what happens is architects say, oh, the council's got it, knowing that the council's got it, but not all of it.
Through you, Mr. Administrator, I might answer that one. Yes, so every time that we go back and request additional information, it'll prompt them. It'll actually everybody say they're following it, so they're an owner, they're following their own application that they've had someone submit on their behalf. It'll actually alert them when there's been a change of status, so we've requested information again. Then when they provide their response to that, that'll notify them again. Then if we have to go back and ask for information again, because it still hasn't been forthcoming or they haven't got it right, then they'll be alerted again. So they will see what's happening through that steps of the process with the back and forth.
Fabulous. Now, the application's approved, okay? The approval will go on to this site. What about where the approval is conditioned that you've got to provide a traffic management plan, you've got to provide, do we make residents, where there's huge excavations, have to provide us with details of where the fuel will be going?
Through Mr. May, it depends on the circumstances. Generally, yes. Like if it's going to be placed on site, so if they're excavating, if it's going to be placed on site, as part of their waste management plan,
Yeah,
that
that's
has
what
to
they're
be
called.
submitted
Yeah.
with the DA. That has to show where the fuel would be going to.
Yeah. But the traffic management plan normally comes after the approval, doesn't it?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct. They may submit, but with the application, but it usually comes after the traffic management plan.
And what about a dilapidation report? That would come after the approval.
That's correct.
Will all that go on this site?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, all of those information would still, even once the application's been determined, we would look to still put up subsequent documentation after that.
I'm happy, because this is what I've been after. And I think it's going to make a quantum difference, not only for residents, but for people who work here. The arguments hopefully will happen over the back fence. The council planners won't get drawn in because, if a neighbour is concerned that, the window is overlooking them, and it's not clear that there's opaque glass, I would imagine the architect for the application, when they see that, will be satisfying the neighbour or amending their application so that it gets a smoother run, rather than having the staff here involved. So look, I think this is fabulous and well done to everybody. And I understand why it's taken so long, because I don't think anybody else in the state has done it.
Through you, Mr. Administrator. That's correct. We will be one of the first that have a system like this.
Well, I think it's a credit to all of you. And thank you, General Manager. It's taken a long time, but we've got there. So any application now lodged after the 28th of February, this will apply to?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.4, the application tracker, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 117 of the business paper and declare it carried. 9.5, Jerumbull toilet location, General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr May. Director Service and Project Delivery, Ms Targa. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May, the purpose of this report is to present the preferred location for the toilet amenity at Yarrambull and the outcome of the community consultation supporting the proposed location. In response to community request for a public toilet facility in Yarrambull, Council staff have investigated available options for the location of this toilet amenity. 3 potential locations were identified, being Vickers Park on Everest Street, the playground located at 49 Sunrise Road, and at the Yarrambull train station. The option assessment undertaken resulted in the most appropriate site to be the location at MF Vickers Park, due to its main road accessibility, minimal impact to residents, and this being on council land. Council undertook a consultative process by engaging with the community via face-to-face sessions, as well as conducting a survey both online as well as meeting with the community on site. The survey results supported the Vickers Park location. The feasibility of utilising the train station for the toilet facility was found to be complex with the transport asset holding entity, indicating that the approval process would be protracted, have financial impacts and may not be approved. As such, based on all the available information and demonstrated community support, it's recommended that the MF Vickers Park is resolved as the most appropriate location for the installation of the toilet facility in the Yarrambull Township. Thank you.
My personal view, and from talking to residents, is that the railway station would have been the best location, but this survey, it's 50-50, goes for the park, but in any event, as you know, I've had meetings with rail about a number of matters, and I just got the impression it would take forever if we got it, approval to put toilets at the railway station. So this is, I think, the only common sense outcome. Are the funds being provided in the draft 24-25 budget for the works to proceed?
Yes, that's correct.
Are we getting an appropriate off-the-shelf product, or are we designing it in-house or with an architect?
It's a prefabricated unit.
And will the residents be given an opportunity to comment?
As it is a prefabricated unit, we can provide the design to them, but there's not a lot of input that can be.
I understand that, but I think it would be appropriate to show them, because there's pre-designed and there's pre-designed. You know, when you travel around, you can see some really good ones that are coming up now compared to what was even 5 years ago. But I think this is a very good outcome, and the Yarrambull community should be happy. In relation to item 9.4, the Yarrambull toilet location, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 122 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Government Road, Bundanoon. It's not introduced, but I've got a question. Just let me see who it is. The Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing. How much are we selling the property for? It's not in the report.
As it is a road closure and under the policy, an independent valuation will be obtained, and under the policy it's within 10% of that value will be negotiated by the General Manager. This is also to, sorry.
No, sorry. You can,
This is also to, there is a cabin built on the road reserve, so it will actually also rectify the encroachment onto the road reserve. So it's a twofold resolution.
and any money that the council may get from the sale of this unmade road must be spent on roads in the environ?
That's correct.
Okay,
under
thanks
the
very much.
policy.
In relation to item 9.6, I'd move the officer's recommendation on page 126 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and declare that carried. Next item, 9.7 on page 131. Another railway one. Hilltop, the land off West Parade. General Manager.
To Mr May, there wasn't proposed to be any introduction unless you have questions.
Yeah, I have got questions. This, in relation to the loop line works, I've been led to believe now that their vision of providing a railway station at Hilltop may not eventuate because of the cost escalations since they got their grant. We have been in discussions with Hilltop residents through their association and independently of the association about the provision of toilets on the railway station, which they were going to build. We said to make them a bit better, we're happy to put some money in towards it. I don't think that's going to happen. In this licence is going to allow us to construct the park, but in the park we have to put toilets now. Will this, the way I read the licence, it doesn't permit a toilet block.
Yes, that's correct. We can go back and ask for inclusion, so that's part of the negotiation, and when we can include that. But to your point, if we want to include some additional wording to ensure that that does happen, I propose that we actually add on to point 2 that in item 1 above, we just add into that recommendation, including the public toilet facility.
Now, I don't want to build expectations at Hilltop that this is going to happen, but I think we have to allow, in any licence agreement, I had hoped that some money that was provided last year and that I think will still be available this year could have been used at Medway, but they seem pretty intent on rebuilding their hall. So that opportunity may go now to, because I'm not talking about millions, that opportunity may now go to Hilltop to see what we can do down there about toilets, which are an issue. And there's going to be a bigger issue when the train goes there, because that's where the stop's going to be, with or without a station. So we'll probably have to deal with that matter next Wednesday or when the draft budgets come. But Medway's made their views pretty clear. And with that, what the residents want, that's what we should be trying to achieve for them. So, okay, in relation to item 9.7, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2, as amended by the director, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. 9.8, curbside waste, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr May. To the Director, Communities and Place, Mr Davis.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. May. The purpose of this report is to present council with the analysis undertaken in the review of the operational models for the management of curbside waste and the impact of to the operations at the Resource Recovery Centre. The report recommends a transition to a direct delivery model based on the basis of the operational savings presenting value to the community. As part of the waste collection and haulage contract extension, updated pricing in line with the original tender in 2013 was sought. This price included the option of delivery to the Mossvale Transfer Station or direct delivery to Spring Farm Transfer Station. As a result, cost modelling of the options was undertaken, including cost savings and budget impact across the waste management life cycle to determine the best option for council in the effective and efficient delivery of waste services for the Shire. The options explored within the report are as follows. The existing transfer station, so the existing model, although not practical due to the limitation of the green waste receive or haul only being able to be accepted there. The delivery, the direct delivery of organics only and maintaining the transfer station, and then finally the direct delivery of all curbside waste streams directly. The direct delivery of all curbside waste streams is the most, in our view, the most efficient and offers council and the community the best value, noting that residents will see no impact to their actual level of service, so they won't see any difference. Mr. May, the recommendation of the officers is that the council endorse the transition to a direct delivery model for all curbside collected waste, and note that as savings are realised, they'll be incorporated back into the long-term financial plan for the determination of domestic waste management charge. And I note the spelling error at point 2 in the report.
Yeah, that can't be changed in the circulated documents, but obviously in the recommendation. An unrelated but related matter, I understand that there's major work going on in the, what a better word, garbage area, to substantially improve the collection zones, that hundreds of more residents will be getting garbage services provided directly by their council at the same price as this in rural areas, the same price as what the village and townships. Is a report coming to council about that soon, or?
Through Mr. May, yes, you are correct. That review is being undertaken at present and is near complete. And yes, a report will be coming to council.
There's hundreds of new services available to residents.
Correct.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.8, I would move the officer's recommendation, obviously changing number 2 to realised, as outlined on page 135 of the business paper 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Next item is 9.9, Tulip Time. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May, and again to the Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing. Thanks.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, Tulip Time 2023 had 62,500 visitors to the festival. The festival ran for 4 days less than 2022, however visitation increased by 1,500 people. The purpose of the event is to provide support to the tourism sector, therefore there is a focus on attracting visitors to the region. In 2023, 62% were first-time visitors, 19% higher than 2022. Due to unseasonably warm weather, the tulips bloomed early, and by the last weekend of the festival, the majority of tulip flowers were lost. As the October long weekend is a week later this year, it is proposed that the festival commences with locals on the 12th of September and finish the weekend prior to the long weekend, with the infrastructure to remain in place for the long weekend for another event to be decided. It is also proposed to hold another community bulb dispersal day at the end of the festival, similar to 2023, which was very successful. The proposed process of the bulb dispersal is outlined in the report.
General Manager, this means that the Tulip Festival is going to be on at the same time as the local government elections. Where's the booth? Where do they use in Barrel?
ask the manager governance and corporate reporting because she's been liaising with the New South Wales Electoral Commission on these matters. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't locked down locations as yet. We're just starting those preliminary discussions at this point.
Can I suggest you say to them that the Memorial Hall? That will also give residents the opportunity to have a look, those who haven't been in it, at what a great outcome has been achieved.
Unfortunately, we already have bookings for the Barrel Memorial Hall for that period, so we're unable to use it as an electoral office. So good and bad.
Yeah, it's up to you to work, but that's because I've noted they've used the old seniors centre on occasions for elections, and that obviously won't be available. So on page 143, you show there's a surplus to budget of $367,987. Is that right? That's an unbudgeted amount?
That there was, I think, a sum of $150,000 budgeted, but we generated that extra revenue, which goes into general revenue.
I'm lost. So
So-
you're allocating 150, but it says
Sorry, the budgeted amount that we estimated to receive as part of the budget was around 150K, but we actually generated $367,987.
why wouldn't you
surplus.
deduct the 150 from that then?
Yeah, I apologise for that.
So really the surplus is 217.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, in relation, look, I think it's well done to all. And, you know, you have recognitions for the ambassadors and for the Lions Club who, you know, do all that work. And I know they get a contribution, but it's nothing into the hours they put into it and their commitment and the way they sell this shire to visitors. That's all recognised, isn't it?
That's correct. It is all recognised. They do receive, Rotary does receive a contribution, but we also do a recognition morning tea. And as part of that, we also get the feedback from the ambassadors on what was well done, and we take that on board for the next, or what needs to be improved, and we take that on board for the next festival.
That's very good. Thanks very much. In relation to item 9.9, Tulip Time Festival, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 141 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Club grants on page 149, there's no introduction. Can club grants, I know that as Director of Communities in Place, the feedback I've got from the council providing defibrillators in villages has been very, very good. Can club grants be used for defibrillators, do you know? If the council can't say where the money goes to, but the council's reps on this committee could be.
Through Mr. May, yes, that's would be appropriate if a grant was to be lodged from a community association or community group or so forth.
Or the council?
Can council submit a grant? It's not normal practice, and I don't believe so.
But what about chambers of commerce?
To Mr. May, yes, my understanding is it's open to any community group that may include a chamber. Could they have to be a not-for-profit organisation?
I tell you what's popping up in the metropolitan area, which you notice when you drive around, is curbside ones, which, you know, I don't know whether Mossvale, Bowral, Mittagong, Bundanoon, I know Bundanoon has one, but it's just a thought. You might, I'm not going to put it into the recommendation, but you might want to just suggest that it could be a good idea. In relation to item 9.10, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 149 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Next item is 9.11, council water meter reading on page 152. Has the council always used a contract to undertake this task?
I'll refer that to the Director of Service and Project Delivery or the CFO. Who'd like to answer that? CFO? Thank you, Mr. Kuzmanowski.
Thank you, General Manager. Yes, we have.
And this tender is in line with expectations?
That's correct, yes.
In relation to item, thank you. In relation to item 9.1, as outlined on page 152 of the business paper, I would move the officer's recommendation 1, 2 and 3 and declare that carried. 9.13, service review. I apologise. Yeah. Water supply to affected areas during an unplanned water, as outlined on page 157 of the business paper. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Director, Service and Project Delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May. At the meeting of the 21st of February, Council resolved that a report be presented to Council on dispatching water to impacted customers with a water connection in the villages in the event of an unplanned water outage. Where an interruption extends beyond 3 hours, additional staff will be mobilised to make bottled water available for those affected in the villages that are supplied with town water at a collection point in that community. Communication with the community will be improved to ensure that the community is informed of the ongoing issue and resolution times. Where applicable, the communications will identify where people can collect drinking water, and during these events, Council will notify residents via local media during business hours and social media and on Council's webpage outside of business hours. Thank you.
So we have details of individual committee groups for localities and villages of third-party Facebook pages.
I believe so.
I think, Mr. May, we might confirm with you. My understanding is we post on Facebook and then it's tagged or linked. No, so we'll come back with a bit more clarity on that one. But my understanding is we post on Council's Facebook and then tag or link it to other Facebook pages. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah, I don't understand. Unless you have the other Facebook addresses, you can't. I appreciate it's just a. It also for village visits would be worthwhile too. I know that there's a different group at Yarrampool, which I've now got their address, but okay, this is a fabulous initiative. In relation to item 9.12, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 157 of the business paper and declare it carried. Now we'll get to 9.13, finance service review outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. May. Before I hand over to Mr. Kuzmanowski, the finance service review is part of our rolling program of service reviews, and those reviews are aimed at ensuring best value of our services and as part of our continuous improvement. So, Mr. Kuzmanowski, I believe we have the VOTAR presenting as well. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. I'll do a quick introduction and then hand over to VOTAR partners to do a quick overview of the outcomes of the service review. So,
well, before you do, if it's a third party, we've got a mere suspension of standing orders, obviously. At 4:55, I'd move suspension of standing orders to allow VOTAR partners to address council on items 9.13 finance service review outcomes and declare that carried. Sorry.
Thank you.
Just formalises it.
Thank you, Administrator. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with the outcomes of the finance service reviews conducted within the recently adopted Delivering Better Services framework. The review was conducted by Vodar Partners, an external independent consultant who specialises in service reviews. The key themes captured as a part of this outcome were clarifying roles and responsibilities within the finance team, modernising systems and processes, including payroll references, and the re-establishment of centre-led procurement. The implementation of the Finance Service Review will be reported to the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee on a quarterly basis. I'll now hand over to Vodar Partners to provide a brief presentation on the outcomes of the Finance Service Review.
Thank you. And Mr. May, so the theme of the key findings that came from allow some key parts of the finance area to also leverage technology, leverage the systems that you're about to implement or upgrade to. And that will make that cycle of your management reporting, your forward-looking modelling, what-if kind of modelling, that makes that a lot more achievable and able to be delivered a little bit more effectively than at the moment. At the moment, it's highly manual activity. Another important observation was that the focus of the team, if I make a comment across all of the finance service unit, really were focused on trying to do a quality job for council. And so the attention to detail that they showed was really very admirable. It's a case of helping them break free from that highly manually intensive process. We recommended 9 initiatives. Some were a minor refinement to structure if that was appropriate on some internal council direction. Really looking at helping the CFO move into a more advisory kind of role with the executive management around some of those future-looking strategic conversations with the community, and then looking at your system implementations, your system upgrades to get the technology working for you rather than the other way around, which is happening in some areas today. And that provides a summary for you.
Look, thanks very much. I think the back of office problems associated with this council were exposed by the General Manager in your roadmap report at a very high level. I must say, when I was told that they were still doing manual payroll, I couldn't believe it. And I don't know what your exposure to that of a council of this size is, whether you have a comment on that.
Oh, it's unusual. Yeah, I personally haven't seen that for a long time.
Yeah.
But it speaks to, so the 2 factors that led into that, the existing system, knowledge of that system is limited to pretty much advanced specialist knowledge is limited to just one individual, and how that system has been managed, the life cycle of it, and the conversation around integration and the kind of business processes, that wasn't occurring. And which is common when people get under a very high workload, a lot of stress, their gaze tends to kind of go down into the transactions, and you kind of miss everything that's happening above you. That's kind of were the characteristics we observed. But it's unusual in today's age to have to have manual award interpretation basically occurring.
And the same with procurement would be, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, the people don't like me saying this, but the problems at this council were just not the elected members. It was the senior management that were here. But anyhow, look, those matters are being addressed. What really disappoints...
Thankfully, that was out of scope.
Well, yeah, and look, and the reality is, and you know, ratepayers were paying twice because they're paying for the software to do all this, but they're still doing it manually. So as you say, it frees up resource, and you know, I don't want to be rude, but I understood what you're saying, and you confirm the issues and they're being addressed. Okay, I've got nothing. General Manager, you got any questions, or have I missed anything? No. And this is being reported now back through the ARIC committee of what's going on. Okay, thanks very much. Correct. Thanks very much for that. I would now move back into council. The standing orders be resumed at 5:04 and declare that carried. In relation, I would note that there was a presentation given. In relation to item 9.13, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 160 of the business paper and declare that carried. The quarterly review, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The CFO, Mr. Kuzminowski, will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. This report is in response to the Council resolution from the meeting held on the 21st of February 2024, requesting the General Manager to provide short commentary on any line item incorporated in the quarterly financial statement with a variation of plus or minus 20,000 to ensure that any resident can understand the underlying reason, amongst other things, for both operating and capital adjustments to the March Council meeting, together with the full-time equivalent staff at the end of the quarter. This report addresses the budget adjustment line items covered, with any variations plus or minus $20,000 that were made as a part of the December 2023 quarterly budget review statement. The actual full-time equivalents were not addressed in this report, but will be addressed as a part of the Q3 budget review report. Thank you.
The notes are extremely scant and really hard to understand. I think that who writes the notes, the coordinator or finance staff?
It's a combination of both.
Well, respectfully, you need more to understand it. This rephrasing, if you go to page 165, look, I could ask questions all day, but I've kind of second-guessed what the answers are, I hope. But I look forward to the next quarterly financial statement and the budget papers. But if you go to page 165, roads and drainage, $839,000, rephasing in roads and drainage maintenance that will be spent in 24-25. In the finance where I am used to, if that's not spent, it's lost. Why is it being rephased? In other words, it's a revote.
I guess reading it within the context of having a table, I guess if you have a P&L, it goes down to the formatting of the report. So looking at the comments in isolation, if you look at the table of which it is operating grants, it's grants and contributions operating. So any unspent grants are restricted at year end and then moved into the next financial year. So a part of, I guess, the difficulty in providing this table that you don't see the full context of a full P&L in regard to it. So,
but you don't need to if there's a little explanation. You know, why is over $800,000 in a maintenance budget? It's not about grants, it's maintenance. Why is that being pushed into the next financial year? You probably can't answer it because the coordinator is the only person from the roads and drainage, not the only person who can answer it. But I would have thought there's enough work to be done on roads and drainage to spend the money in this financial year.
I can't answer why specifically from a delivery perspective, but from a budgeting perspective, we are accounting for it based on the advice we're given, and the best way forward is to restrict the funds and move it into the following financial year.
Look, I don't want to be unfair by asking questions that they're important. And I don't know, have you got an answer for?
I believe that it has to do with the completion of the design. So the completion of the design is delayed and therefore the money is pushed into the next financial year. That's my understanding.
Well, that'd be helpful to have another sentence to make it clearer. Otherwise, you just get peppered with questions about it. And this is not cumulative. These are only adjustments in the quarter. So to have a proper understanding, you need to take account of the first quarter. Now, that's not uncommon in local government. That happens everywhere. But you need to appreciate that this is just not for this quarter. The corporate finance, $400,000 net expense due to salary structure review, transferred from people and culture budget. So I should be able to find $400,000 somewhere as a negative, and then you got the positive?
So if you have a look through there, we've got a $590,000 initially moved in from people and culture, and the net reduction in the corporate finance area was $400,000. So there's a net $190,000 movement between the two of those.
Okay. And underneath that, you've got the salary savings in each of the coordinated areas, which I think is very helpful.
That's correct.
But again, you've got to read it with the first review, and the first review, from recollection, showed up savings of about 1.5 million. Now, in the future, that 1.5 million will be allocated across the at coordinator level.
That's correct.
So
yes.
a councillor will be able to see, or a resident will be able to see, if there's a problem with getting staff or whatever. And I don't run away from the fact that there's problems getting staff because you don't pay them enough. But that's in local government, full stop, and it's very hard to get people. If you go to Joe Edge, the 118,000, I can't see where that money is coming in from reserves. It's only. It looks like it's an effect on general fund, or am I reading it incorrectly?
That is read correctly. So the council resolution for that read that we would fund it from general revenue pending legal advice on whether we could fund it from the reserve.
So you could look forward to potentially in the next quarterly financial statement to coming back in.
So, as the CFO said, we're seeking legal advice because the way in which the reserve or the trust, in quotation marks, was established and the mechanism to draw down on that. So a further report will come back with advice on that, and then there'll be, ideally, a budget adjustment against that.
Just to complement that, the advice won't be back in time for the Q3, so if not, we'll deal with it as a year-end adjustment.
Yeah, look, I hear the answer, but I just highlighting just needs another sentence.
I think, Mr. Mayor, this is the first time we've drilled down to this level. Listening to VOTAs as well and some of the manual processes that still exist in finance. So we've taken it from a 50K to a 20K level. The CFO's also explained at the end of quarter, you'll see a profit and loss statement, a P&L, at the coordinator level with the FTE, full-time effective, and the vacancy rate, and this level of detail. So at the moment, this report was provided following the resolution of the last council meeting, and the next round it will come together, which will make it a lot easier. But I do acknowledge that the text or the comments that are provided in the report do not tell the story. Those that put it in there, they know what they mean, but it doesn't actually make it clear for the reader to understand and the audience.
Look, we have come an enormous way in the last 3 years. All they did was provide, that's how much is in salaries. There was no breakdown. And, you know, this is being open and transparent as a council should. So, you know, I think that's good. There's a couple that did worry me though. Sustainability services, $60,000 increase for fleet EV transition project funded from environmental levy. How much was there originally there?
There was nothing put in the budget at that point in time. So it was,
Why has the 60,000 arrived now?
that was a quotation received from the vendor that is providing the review on the EV review.
But the council asked on the 10th of May, when dealing with the budget, that a further report come back on all this and the effect on the 10-year financial plan. And I don't think you should be spending any money until you have some indication of whether the council can afford it without wasting 60,000, in my view.
I guess this is funding that review to come back to council. So this is paying for the consultants to conduct the review, which is currently happening, to then provide that holistic picture on EV charges, transitioning to electric fleets and whatnot.
I think this is contrary to a decision of the council. But anyhow, you can deal with it because the council asked for the effect of having an EV fleet on the 10-year plan. And look, I understand the aspiration of what they're trying to do, but we have to be realistic in what you're trying to achieve, or the environment people are trying to achieve. It says funded from environment levy. Well, it may be, but it's still public money. And so I'd like to see the original matter addressed before you spend money on consultants, because there's no authorisation.
Just for clarification, and the CFO might correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose of that was that funding was being spent to be able to answer that question. So we don't have the technical knowledge and expertise to be able to answer the question that council posed without that.
Well, then it's worse than what I thought. That should have come back to council with that advice. That's what it's going to cost us to get you that answer, $60,000. And I would have said, well, don't spend it, don't do anything, because let it catch up before we take off, is what I'm trying to say. $60,000 is a lot of money to answer a question that the council asks when there was no money provided to start with. I should have been told, well, this is aspirational. There's no money provided. To get you the answer, you've got to spend 60. That's what it's just about accountability and transparency for councillors. Page 169, Redford Farm Detention Basin. Is this $1 million over budget?
Through you, Mr. May. No, we're actually delivering the project ahead of schedule, and therefore we're bringing $1 million that was in next year's budget into this year's budget.
Again, it would have been helpful to know it's running ahead of time. And I just can't find, I looked at the quarterly financial statement till the end of September in this one, and originally I thought it was $67,000 additional money for tulip time, but you need to take the 150 off it that's provided. Where can I find the additional $217,000?
I think that was brought to account in the September review and brought to account as general revenue and then offset against other general revenue adjustments that were made during that September review.
I couldn't find it. That's much more than $50,000.
Okay, I'll take it on note. I don't have the information with me, but I'll provide a note to confirm that the adjustment was made. I'm sure the adjustment was made, whether it was
That's
reported.
a lot of money. I mean, it probably has been, but for a person who doesn't have access to all this financial information, and at the end of the day who was responsible, I found it extremely difficult to find it. It pops up in a report. Now, it's acknowledged that figure was wrong, and I understand why, but the net amount should be shown because it's more than $50,000. So, look, I think we're getting there. It's unbelievably different to what it was, and I think the 20,000 is potentially too low to look at, but if you are going to cascade down financial responsibility, in my view, it's the only way to go. Okay, so the information in relation to the head count, or whatever you, equivalent for, will be with the next quarterly statement. But the budget papers, will they have any indication that they'll have how many staff you need to fund, but will they have any indication of how many staff you have?
No, we haven't done that for what we're preparing for next week. We're preparing just the budgeted structure.
Look, my personal view is it's only going to get worse trying to get operational staff, and you may have to start looking at more contracting. And if you advertise and advertise and advertise and you can't get them, the casualty is the resident. So they're not getting their lawns mowed, etc., etc. So that's where I'm trying to come from. Anyhow, in relation to item 9.14, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 164 of the business paper and declare that carried. 9.15, the IPART terms of reference, the General Manager's indicated to she wants to say something about, the General Manager wants to say something about this one.
Yep, thank you, Mr. May. So whilst it wasn't intended to be introduced, we received an email yesterday from the IPART in relation to their original review of New South Wales Council financial model and a change in direction following a letter from the Premier. I'll ask the CFO to update the Council. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. So yesterday, Council received correspondence from IPART advising the following. On 19 March 2024, IPART received a letter from the New South Wales Government withdrawing the referral for the review of the financial modelling of councils to avoid unnecessary duplication, as the matter will now instead be considered by New South Wales Parliament's Standing Committee on State Development. IPART will consider all feedback received in response to the draft terms of reference and provide a summary of issues raised by stakeholders to the New South Wales Government. IPART will publish all non-confidential submissions in line with IPART's submission policy. Thank you.
So do we defer this matter or do we still send in our submission?
It's up to the council. I would suggest that we submit. The deadline closed. We did seek an extension in which IPART considered out and allowed us to have an extension. So I presume, and without having the information available, there will be some sort of terms of reference issued by the Standing Committee on by the New South Wales Government.
Look, I support what they've done because it's highlighting the impact of grants and the like on balance sheets. But we don't deal in our submission on the financial model depreciation and its impact on the balance sheet.
I think it was explicitly covered in the terms of reference from IPART. I focus more on the cost shifting side of things in providing that. So the additional information that we did provide, I didn't explicitly call out depreciation. I thought it was covered as a part of that in relation to the rate peg.
Yeah, but state and federal governments don't get treated the same way with depreciation as local government. And depreciation is not even audited, but it has such an impact. Can I then move the officers, deleting number 2, because again that's the General Manager's job. I don't know how come this has all of a sudden appeared in recommendations, but endorse the terms of reference for review of the New South Wales Council Financial Model Submission Attachment 2, subject to the General Manager being satisfied that depreciation and its financial impact on end-of-year statements are addressed in the terms of reference. You with me? Yes. Yeah. Because, you know, you look at a council's end of year and you think, oh, they're broke. But, and you know, if you, well, you know what how it works. Okay, so I'm sorry, I wasn't. Yeah, subject to the General Manager being satisfied that depreciation and its being satisfied that depreciation. What do I write here? And its impact on end of year financial statements is adequately addressed in the terms of reference. Thanks for that. Declare that carried. 9.16 private land conservation, page 180. I've got a few questions on this one. It's not being introduced. The report says there are 164 visitors to the site. There were no letters, this is my reading, correct me if I'm wrong, and 5 digital responses.
Mr Administrator, that's correct.
Then the whole report is predicated on the 5 digital responses,
That's correct.
but they're anonymous.
This may the have your say at the time. So this was put out, set up and put out in November of last year through to December, and the fields that are through our website pick up on a username, but didn't explicitly ask for mandatorily a person's actual name. So it's something that's being will be addressed in future consultations. So we have usernames for these people, which is often a nickname like Mazza or whatever, but not actually their real name.
Oh. But I thought there has been consultations prior to this one where we've given the names. Is this just how it was advertised? Or is this a system failure or a manual failure?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to say both, because the people that set it up could have asked for the systematic capability, and they could have asked for that field, but knowing that council wants that detail to be reported every time, it should be a system default that it has to. They're mandatory fields.
This is a substantial. Look, it's a status quo report. There's no question about that. I've read it all, but I just have great difficulty in agreeing with. Was this considered by the panel, or were people who have these wildlife? What are they called? Land for wildlife. Were they all written to and told about this review of policy?
Mr. Mayor, I think we'll take that on notice. So if you're of the mind, the matter could be deferred, and if there are particular questions you have, we can provide that in the response to the next meeting.
Mm. Well, look, I don't think it's going to hurt if it gets deferred. There's no need to recirculate the document, but if I'm just worried that it's not transparent. Having anonymous, I understand, you can't put people's addresses or phone numbers and that kind of stuff. But I would have thought that in a consultation like this, we would have gone to those who are using it already. So I defer for further information. In relation to item 9.16, I'd move that matter be deferred for further information. Declare that carried. The loans borrowing program 217. No introduction. Was this matter considered by ARIC?
Thank you, CFO.
No, it wasn't. It's just for public exhibition, so we can refer it to ARIC if we'd like to through the exhibition period, but in short the answer is no, it wasn't referred to ARIC.
Do you think it would be appropriate to ask ARIC during the consultation period?
I don't see why not.
Okay. I'll move the recommendation 1 and 2, subject to ARIC's views being sought.
Thank you.
Number 3 or not necessary? Yeah. Okay. In relation to item 9.17, I'd move the officer's recommendation 1 and 2 on page 217 of the business paper and declare it carried. 9.18 on page 230. No introduction. In relation to item 9.18, liquid trade waste policy, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on pages 1 and 2, as outlined on page 2, 3 out of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried. 9.19, page 275. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The CFO will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to endorse the newly created draft farmland rating policy to be placed on public exhibition for 28 days. The policy formalises the criteria to provide transparency for community in how council determines requests of rating of farmlands. This policy has been developed in accordance with the Local Government Act provisions and reviewed by external legal advisors. Council has also consulted with neighbouring councils to ensure consistency in application of legislation. The recommendation is tabled in the council report. Thank you.
If a resident wanted to make a submission in relation to dairies, is now the time you would do it or not?
So I refer that to the CFO.
Yes, they can refer now. The policy that we've got in place is consistent with the procedures that we're currently enacting. So there wouldn't be a difference whether they submit now or whether they submit after the adoption of the policy.
But if they want to have a say in the policy, if they think your farmland policy should have a subcategory, now would be the time to do it, or can't you have subcategories?
In the policy, it's got a...
No, not the policy, what the law is. You're putting the policy on exhibition. What does the law say? That you can have subcategories for farming?
That's correct, yes.
And how are you proposing to put this on public exhibition?
Just through the normal channels. I'd need to consult with the manager of community life and libraries to ensure that we've got the right engagement channels going through. We'll also notify the ratepayers that are currently classified as farmland to ensure that they get a copy of that as well.
Oh, so people who are classified as farmland will get a copy?
I can provide that assurance, yes.
That's a lot of... Okay, so the people who are making submissions to me in relation to farmland and dairies, they'll get a copy.
If you provide the details, so just confirm.
No, they'll get a copy because you said you're going to write to everybody who's categorised as farmland.
If they are, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry to cut you off.
That I was just going to cover that this doesn't cover the subcategories of rating. This is just the classification of going. So we've got a farmland rating category. So this does not cover a subcategory or a different category of farmland in terms of having a dairy farmland subcategory. This is just categorising from a residential or a business into a farmland categorisation.
I understand, but if look, there's people who have dairies who believe we should have a similar. Look, I've spoken to you about it. We should have a similar system to Shellhaven, I think, and I don't support it because I've now had a closer look at what the rate in the dollar is for farmland compared to the rate in the dollar for other areas. But just because I don't support it, they might come up with a submission that changes people's minds. But the real question is, I don't want to lead them up a garden path. Maybe you cannot further subcategorise. I don't know.
I can't recall what Shellhaven does specifically, but I believe there may be some financial differences in the rate in the dollar compared for dairy farms compared to normal farms for Shellhaven, but I'd need to take that on notice. That's where I believe the difference is from a general farmland category versus a dairy farmland category, which this policy doesn't cover. This just covers farmlanding generally.
Well, look, if you're writing to all people who have a farmland category, that'll get picked up, they'll be able to see. The only other thing is, the report says in December 23, we wrote to the Minister about the effect of agro-tourism on categorisation. Have we had a response?
Sorry, the report says that it was,
Page 276.
yeah, apologies, sorry to cut you off. The report says that it was tabled at the December 2023 council meeting, so the follow-up to that letter went out about a week ago.
We've just written to the Minister now,
Correct,
and the meeting was in December.
correct.
Okay, in relation to item 9.19, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 275 of the business paper, 1 and 2, on the understanding you're writing to all the farmland people, and declare that carried. The 9.20, the fraud and corruption business ethics, General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. To the Director, Corporate Strategy and Resourcing. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report presents the draft fraud and corruption policy and the draft statement of business ethics to seek Council's endorsement for public exhibition for a period of 28 days. The New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption advises New South Wales public sector agencies that they must have a fraud and corruption control policy outlining the agency's appetite or tolerance for fraud and corruption. Council's statement of business ethics is an important part of Council's fraud and corruption prevention framework. The draft fraud and corruption prevention policy has been developed to set the framework for Council's zero tolerance approach to fraud and corruption. Fraud and corruption are incompatible with Council's values and present a risk to the achievement of Council's objectives and the provision of services to the public in a cost-efficient, effective and ethical manner. The policy is based on ICAC's advice on developing a fraud and corruption control policy. The Australian Standard AS 8001/2021 has been benchmarked against other councils. Key changes include expanded objectives, updated definition of corruption and the inclusion of examples of fraud and corruption, extensive revision of Section 3. Policy content was undertaken as the previous council policy was based on the New South Wales Audit Fraud Control Improvement Kit, which has now been superseded. The Statement of Business Ethics is a means of providing guidance regarding the standards of the ethical behaviour that external service providers can expect from council officials. Similarly, the Statement of Business Ethics also articulates the standards of ethical behaviour expected of external service providers in their dealings with Wingecarribee Shire Council. Following a review of various other councils' statements of business ethics, Council's statement was revised to reflect its updated vision and values, adds references to modern slavery and defines Council's officials. It also addresses additional requirements for doing business with Council in the areas of work, health and safety, sponsorship and political donations.
Thank you. Thank you. In relation to item 9.20, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 292 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Investment report, there is no introduction. In relation to item 9.21, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 309 of the business paper and declare that carried. In relation to section 355 committee, minutes, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 317 of the business paper and declare that carried. Community reference panels, there's no introduction, but I've got a few questions. Looking at, I understand it was a joint meeting, and if you recall, at the last meeting, and I think this meeting happened a couple of days after it, I raised there appeared to be more apologies than attendees, and I question the value and the underlying criticism, and I asked that this be raised at the meeting the next day. The minutes don't give any indication of that.
That meeting agenda was very big, but what had happened at previous meetings, late 2023, is we did seek formal feedback from the committee. So I have started preparing that briefing note that you requested at the council meeting, so that will come to you shortly. There was this agenda, the way we formatted the combined meeting was in response to some of the feedback that we had received from the committees in 2023, end of 2023, that they did want to at least annually meet. And I think it also responded to the feedback that we've received from them for sort of genuine engagement activities within the meeting. So we did 2 different engagement techniques during the committee on 2 different significant projects for the Shire, and the initial feedback at the end of that meeting was very positive.
Were there too many people there?
No, well, I think
when people don't turn up, it's a sign that's not working. You're doing a briefing note to me, and I suppose then I can speak to the GM I've got some views, but I was waiting to find out what residents were.
And I think some of the committee also acknowledged they're still in their forming stage.
They're still what?
In their forming stage as panels. I guess the large, the area where we're having a little bit of issues with buying is the industry or government representatives, so we need to understand more clearly from them why they're not able to attend as we anticipated. So I have some preliminary information that will aid some further conversation.
Mm-hmm. But anyhow, okay, in relation to item 9.23, the committee reference panel, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 357 of the business paper. The final matter is the traffic committee minutes of the meeting held on 15 February. I was very happy to be able to see online the fact that it's now open and residents were given a chance, and at the end the recommendations were read out, and I think that's a far more transparent way of doing it, so thank you very much for that. In relation to item 9.24, the traffic committee, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 362 of the business paper and declare that carried. General Manager, before I close the meeting, any late items?
Yes, Mr. May. I wish to advise that the Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms. Carmel Foster, will be leaving us. I wish to thank Carmel for her dedication and contribution over the last 2.5 years. Carmel arrived at a time of upheaval and has worked to build the Corporate Strategy and Resourcing Directorate to align with organisational deliverables. During her time in the role, we've seen a number of initiatives delivered, including events such as Highlands Fest and growth within the Tulip Time, showcasing the region's tourism and industry, opening of the Bowral Memorial Hall in 23, facilitating the reviews of children's services, the finance area as we saw tonight, and the visitor centre, developing the customer service charter and standards with the team, working with Safe Work New South Wales to ensure that council complies with the enforceable undertaking that arose from a workplace accident back in 2018, one of the many legacy issues that we're still dealing with. Preparing the digital strategy to ensure that council remains current in its technology and vigilant in cyber security, and making significant inroads into our property activities. I thank Carmel for her support of her team, her colleagues within the executive, and to me as General Manager. It's not an easy role, and I appreciate the way in which you've conducted yourself. the positive changes that she has made and has provided a foundation for the future director to build upon as we continue our journey to reset. Council CFO, Mr. Pav Kuzmanovsky, will be acting director whilst we undertake the recruitment process, which will commence in April. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you for that. Will that be built into the minutes? It doesn't need, well, there's no action on the part of the council. Yeah, just add it to the end. Okay, with that, I close the meeting at 5:45, and thank everyone for their attendance.